I've got an amazing story about my Las Vegas tanks. I once had like almost over 100 fish tanks in my house at one time. I had bought out a aquarium store in Las Vegas, a pretty popular one. I used to have a 120 gallon and a 100 gallon tank and a 60 gallon tank. I had 3 tanks in my house at its peak. My girlfriend at the time and I used to go out, and on the weekend we'd go and buy fish. That was our thing. There was only a few fish shops in Vegas and we used to kind of hit them all. And then if we saw something we liked, we'd buy it. If not, we'd at least have a nice trip where we went and saw fish. And one of the stores that was near where I lived was called, I think, Green Valley Aquarium. And it was right off of a highway. And they had a lot of construction on that area at the time. And we would go there and visit. The prices there were a little bit steep, but you know, when you walk up and down the aisles and you see all the fish and see all the gear and the equipment, it was fun just to look, you know. And so we went in there many times. But eventually we went in there and we could see that there was a sign on the wall that was saying going out of business sale. And when we pulled up in our car, we were like, wow, what an opportunity for us. If it's going out of business, maybe they're gonna have good prices to liquidate this stuff. We met the owner and the guy is really nice. And I said, you know, what kind of deals do you have? And he was like, 10% off everything. It was some sort of blanket percentage off, but even 10% off their overpriced stuff, it was pretty expensive. I says, when are you gonna close? He says, when the lease is up, and it was like a couple of weeks away or something. And I says, okay, well, I'll just come back maybe more close to the deadline to see if there's any opportunity to buy stuff. I went back there a couple more times and it was still the same 10% off, and things were still sitting on the shelves, and there was tanks after tanks, rows and rows of tanks with all sorts of interesting little critters in them. Every time I went back there, it didn't seem like he was lowering the price to try and get rid of the remaining stock in his store. And so one final day I decided, I said, you know what, I'm gonna go back there. He should be closing his doors already. I didn't even know if he was open or not. And I go in there and I meet the owner and his wife. And I walk into the store and I say, how are things going? You know, what have you sold? Let me see. The whole store was full of stuff. And I looked at him, I says, when are you guys closing? He says, I'm handing over the keys tomorrow. I looked at him, I says, what are you talking about? I says, you've got walls of tanks. I says, you've got livestock, you've got desks and RODI units. He had a live rock tank, a 300 gallon tank full of live rock. I mean, it was, I looked at him in the eyes, I says, why didn't you try to get rid of all this stuff? He's like, I don't know, nobody came to get it, and we don't have time, the lease is up tomorrow, and I'm just gonna hand over the keys. And so I asked him, I says, who's the next guy? I says, is the next guy gonna give you money for, you know, all this stuff? Is the next guy gonna do a fish shop? What's the story? He's like, I don't know. I don't know who the guy is that's gonna take it, but I have a suspicion that it's one of the workers at the store. And he has been kind of eyeballing everything. I think, he hasn't told me, but I think he's gonna take over the lease and he's gonna have probably a whole fish shop all set up for him. And I says, well, are you sure? Can you ask him, you know, if he's gonna take it? He says, well, he hasn't told me he's gonna take it, but I'm guessing he will. I says, guessing? What if somebody comes in here and wants to make it an office or something non-fish related? They're gonna throw away all of this stuff. All these things that you worked so hard for. I mean, he's had this business for like 50 years or something. It was one of the oldest fish shops in town, and he was just broken. So really frustrated and sad that his business was kind of going to the wayside like this. 请按绿色键取卡。请系好安全带。And he wasn't sure. He couldn't give me a 100% confirmation that this guy was going to take the store, but he was like me. He loved the hobby. He had fallen on some hard times, and he was ready to get out, and he was frustrated because he felt like everything he worked so hard for was just gonna be melting away. And the thing was that if I even told him, I says, well, if this co-worker wants to take over the fish store, why doesn't he just come to you and ask you and say, boss, don't worry about the place. I'll take care of it. I'm gonna take over the lease. I'll make sure that your legacy lives on, because he wasn't worried about the money, really. He was more concerned with the store having a future and not being lied to. He felt really lied to by this worker that was intending to kind of sneak in there and take over the store, because he had suspected it. I guess he had seen him milling around looking at stuff, probably eyeballing it, like, ah, yeah, this is how I'm gonna take over this place. And this old couple was really nice. They weren't like somebody you'd want to pull a fast one on. And I even asked him, I says, if this guy was to come to you and say, I'm gonna take over the lease, can I just let everything stay as it is? I'll give you 500 bucks, or whatever the case. I'll give you something. And at least you'll know that your store is being taken care of. And I asked him this, and he said, no, he hasn't asked me that. To be honest, I feel like he's more angling for this opportunity of a lifetime. Anyways, I was looking at a tank that they had there, a setup that they hadn't sold yet. It was one of their samples, you know, where they put some of the nice corals to sell. It was a little bit used, but I thought it would be a really nice tank for my house. I kind of had a thought, because I had moved to Vegas a few years before that, and I had moved there. I bought a moving van. It was a 24-foot box truck, and I owned it. And it was sitting in some parking lot collecting dust, doing nothing. And I looked at his store, and I looked at him, and I looked at his store, and I looked at him, and I just threw a Hail Mary. I said, listen, you've got this store. I've got a huge truck. If you want, why don't I buy this fish tank, and then I'll take everything out. And then I'll put it on Craigslist, I'll try to sell it, and whatever I sell, I'll split it with you 50-50. Then at least you know somebody with some love for the hobby is gonna be capitalizing off of everything that you've built. And he looked at me, and then he looked at his wife, and I says, you know, listen, this is just, I'm just throwing it out there. I says, you've got a lot of stuff here. I could get a few friends, we could come by, and we could just empty the place out. I could put it at my house, and then at least you would know that it's safe, and that this place isn't going to turn into some little supermarket, and somebody isn't going to look at all of what you built and say, yeah, I got to throw all this stuff away. What a pain in the ass, you know? To be honest, if it wasn't this coworker that was going to take it and turn it into another form of a fish shop, then maybe I was doing the next leaseholder a favor by taking everything out and getting rid of it. He said, go ahead. And long story short, he put his hands out and he dropped his keys into my hand. And he says, the people will be here in the morning to take the keys. Take whatever you can. I had just taken ownership for a night of an entire aquarium and saltwater fish store. It was crazy. So then I went and tried to give him money for the fish tank, and he's like, no, don't worry about it. What I really want is to know that this is going somewhere where somebody's got some passion, and it's not just being thrown away. He didn't even take the $300 or $350, I think, for that big fish tank setup. So I came with a bunch of my buddies, bought them all beers, opened up the back of my box truck right in front of his storefront, and I gutted the place. I took his oak desk with a beautiful, like, it was an L-shaped desk. I took two huge water storage containers that became my RODI water containers. I took his RODI units that were on the wall. I took any pumps that I found. I took cases upon cases upon cases of chemicals, nitrate tests, fish nets, filters, just everything that I could. I felt like anything I could have here that could be of value, I'm gonna take it, and then I'm gonna try and sell it. I looked at the rows upon rows of fish tanks. They weren't huge. They were like, you know, 20, 25 gallon fish tanks. But there was like 100 of them, rows upon rows upon rows. And I looked at everybody, they said, what do you want to do with this? I says, well, If somebody comes in here and just wants to set up an office, they're gonna have nothing to do with these fish tanks. I says, let's take them. So one by one, I pulled them off the shelf. Now this fish tank store, I don't know 50 years. I said 50 years, I think maybe 20 years. A long time this fish tank store was here. And what happens is that over the years of salt water and water changes and, you know, fish jumping out of fish tanks, it was sort of like a museum of petrified fish that had jumped behind the tanks that no one was able to clean ever. From the time that they installed the tanks to the time that I actually removed the tanks, these were undisturbed locations, and they were full of amazing frozen forms of every fish you could imagine. Fish, eels, I saw some dragon eels that were all wound up, and they must have jumped behind there and just died, and they were perfectly encased in salt. It was really amazing. It was like they were salted fish, you know, like frozen, dried out salted fish. When I went to the live rock container, this live rock container had, I don't know, 300 pounds of rock in it, at least. And it was tonka branch, some good stuff. And he had shut the power off for like a week. I mean, this water was cold. I didn't expect anything to be alive. I just thought that maybe the bacteria on the live rock would still be good because it was still submerged in water. So I went in there and I started pulling out the rocks, and lo and behold, a bunch of emerald crabs were crawling out. I had a bunch of little hermit crabs and starfish and all sorts of things. It really is a testament to the endurance of some of these life forms, because I pulled an amazing amount of life out of those live rock containers, along with little feather dusters and things that were attached to the rock. Really a wild amount of things I pulled from that tank. Along with all of those things, all the tanks that were lined up, you know, in the rows in the main area of the store, those had some standing water in it. Some of those had some, you know, little hermit crabs in them and stuff. It was kind of like being an archaeologist or a marine biologist almost. You're going through the store and you're finding these little life forms, and you're trying to take care of them and put them in, you know, the truck as nice as possible. I was there with a group of people till about 1 o'clock. Then the group left. They didn't want to stay any longer, so I stayed, and I ended up really emptying that place out. It wasn't without a couple of little breakages. A couple of tanks fell off the wall as I was carrying them out, and cracked and crashed everywhere. We left a bit of a mess. We tried our best, but we were in a hurry to get this stuff out because there was a time limit. It was the morning. There was nothing else you could do. And we actually left quite a bit of tanks left on that wall, but we took about 100 tanks. We took a lot of stuff, and took it to my house, put it in my garage. When I met the owner one last time, he gave me a little piece of paper, and he said, me and my wife are gonna go, we're done with this fish tank stuff, we're gonna go into, I think it was Arizona or Utah or something. They had a little house, nothing special. They were gonna kind of just live the retired life. And he gave me his number on a little piece of paper. And this is where the story becomes really rotten on my side. Because I took the tanks and I started selling them, and I didn't make a lot. You can't sell a 20-gallon used tank for much. It was more or less, I was kind of selling them for like 10 bucks a piece. I sold the chemicals in a big bulk group to another couple of people, and you know, just little by little I sold this stuff. I didn't do justice to the amount of stuff that I pulled out of there. I really wished I could have made a little bit more money so that I could have shown him that his stuff was worth a little bit more. In the end, I don't know if I made more than $1,000 off of everything that I took out of that store. I intended always to give him his fair share, and to be honest, to give him more than his fair share. I wanted to give him $1,000 for the tank, because I actually used the tank that he was selling that day, and for all that stuff I took out, I just felt like I had to give him something. But I never was able to find that slip of paper again. I don't know where it went. It just disappeared. By the time I had gathered together and sold a bunch of the stuff, and I thought, hey, I need to pay this guy back, and I've got some money in my hand, the piece of paper disappeared, and I never was able to find it again. So I'm gonna throw this out to you guys. If you guys know who I'm talking about, please connect me with him. I would love to give him a call. I'd love to tell him this story. I'd love to tell him that I appreciate what he did for me, and that in appreciation, I would want to give him his money that he deserves. I forget his name. Everybody in Vegas that has been there a long time should know this place though. Another rotten side to this story is that the owner was correct in his assumption that the employee was going to take over the store. And wow, his face when he walked into that place and saw it completely gutted, he must have been heartbroken and pissed. I would say rightly so, but you know what? It was up to that previous owner to do whatever he wanted with that store up until the moment that that lease was up. He could have walked in there with a sledgehammer and broken everything and threw everything out, and he could have said nothing. Or that employee could have approached him 2 weeks before the lease was up and said, you know what, boss, I'd really like to take care of this place. And when I walked in and made my proposal, he would have said to me, I'm sorry, but you know what, my employee's gonna take it, and I'm relieved. Because you know what, he told me he's gonna do a good job, and I'm letting him have it. And then I would have said, great, go for it. Because that's really all I wanted too. So this guy that took it walked in thinking, I mean really, he probably left his job 2 weeks prior to the store closing, and when he got there to pick up his keys for this place that he thought that he got, you know, for a song and a dance, and it's gonna be set up as a fish store for him, he walked in to a disaster. I mean, it was gutted. But anyways, the employee hates my guts. And he actually told some of the other fish guys in Las Vegas that if he ever saw me go into his store, that he would put a gun to my head and he'd shoot me. He was that angry. So what did I do? I put on a hat and I went there and I bought a fish. I went there. He didn't even know it was me. But I bought something from the store and I looked at it. He had it set up as a nice little store, but he had to start a little bit more from scratch. All because he wasn't honest. If he was honest, he would have gotten that whole infrastructure set up, untouched, ready to go. But he made a bet. He made a bet that nobody was gonna go in there and make the deal that I'd made, and he lost. And if he would have been honest, he would have won. And it probably wouldn't have cost him anything, because those owners made that deal with me really not expecting much in return. They even gave me my money back that I was gonna spend on that tank. They were just happy to know for certain what was gonna happen with their store. They didn't know for certain if this guy was gonna take it. And if that guy would have told him, he probably would have had no problem. If he would have just talked to them in a way that showed respect and, you know, reverence for the job and the store, and said, hey, anyways, I'm gonna put that to bed. That was a perfectly timed story, because I'm almost to Leo's factory, and yeah, we're gonna empty all this stuff, and phase 1 will be complete. This is gonna be a multiple phase mission, actually, because I'm gonna have to do something with the sand and the rest of the rock in the fish tank. I think it's one more of these trips, I'll be good to go.